All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jamie Kuhl. I'm a program manager in the Team Foundation Server organization, or TFS as we all know and love it. You know, one of the jobs that I have as a program manager is supposed to be to, understand the customer, figure out what we're supposed to build, represent it. But with TFS, it's a bit of a challenge because we have a lot of different customers. TFS is supposed to try to bring all the different parts of the organization together. So we have customers that are testers, project managers, business analysts, stakeholders, operations guys, whole different spectrum. But for the next hour, we're not talking about any of those guys at all. We're talking about just one customer, the developer. And we're doing that not because we're a developer conference, but because focusing on the developer and the experiences that you guys have with TFS has been one of the biggest single themes that we've had for this release of Team Foundation Server. Because we recognize that even though we have a lot of different customers, you guys, the developers, are the ones that use the product the most day in and day out. And if we're not helping you do your job, then we're not doing a good job ourselves. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And essentially, I got one slide. We'll talk about release themes, and then we're just going to do demos of all the interesting stuff that we've got in the new version of TFS. At some point, I'm going to run out of time. When I run out of time, I'll throw up a slide of a list of other stuff that we're probably not going to have time to demo. That's pretty much our talk. So let's go ahead and get started. So our one slide. So I want you guys to do me a favor. If you use TFS today, I want you to think, if you could change just one thing in the product, what would it be? I want you to think for a minute, get that one thing in your mind. And okay, so just the rules of this though. Number one, if it's not around something a developer would do, I don't want to hear about it. And I want to hear about like process templates and those kind of things. If it's not, if it's something that you saw, if your number one thing you already saw earlier in the show, and you're picking your number two, that doesn't count either. But so think of that number one thing, and I'm going to make two bets for you. One bet is, for a lot of you, you're going to see it sometime in the next hour. At least I hope you will. The second bet is, I'm willing to bet the thing that you've got in your mind right now has something to do around friction, right? Like you're trying to do something, and in some way, TFS is getting in the way, causing pain. So that was the first theme of what we were trying to do, is just try to have an experience that was as smooth and as possible, help you do your job and not be in the way when you don't want us to be. The second theme was modern. I think I saw in both of the keynotes. In Sanofi's keynote, he showed the Task Manager, 20, 25 years old. In Jason's keynote, he showed the Visual Studio Image Editor, 20 years old. The TFS version of that would be our merge tool, for example, which goes back to, I'm sad to say, VSS. So just across the board, we were trying to modernize the product, not just kind of replacing those old components, but trying to give everything a refresh, trying to get rid of modal dialogues, get rid of synchronous calls. So there's been a big refresh to the developer experience inside of Visual Studio along these lines. And then the third thing was collaboration. And when I talk about collaboration in this context, I'm not really meaning collaboration between the developer and all the other different disciplines of a job. Really, I'm talking right now about developer collaboration between you and your fellow developers. For example, the ultimate form of developer collaboration, two guys trying to merge their code together. That would be an example. So a bunch of different things. Let's just go ahead and jump into the demos. So let me switch over here. Okay, so this is the new version of Team Explorer. So in this release, we chucked the old Team Explorer. We built a new one. Let me tell you a little bit about why we did that. In the early days when we were planning the release, we started to get a set of features. And we thought, okay, good set of features. How would we expose, and we went down the list one by one and asked, okay, how would we expose this feature in Visual Studio? And we thought for a minute and we said to ourselves, okay, for that one, we would build a new tool window inside of Visual Studio. And we were happy because we knew how much you guys loved it when we put new tool windows into Visual Studio. And then we went to the next feature and we said, how would we expose that one? And we said, new tool window. And again, we were happy. And we did this over and over again. And then we got a little sad because we realized the list of tool windows in Visual Studio was going off the screen. So we kind of said maybe that wasn't a great plan. So with the new version of Team Explorer, we asked ourselves, could we take some of our existing tool windows, some of the new tool windows that we were talking about, some of the modal dialogues that we have all over the place, and combine them into one window that basically aggregates them together, has its own kind of internal navigation model, and that's what the new Team Explorer is. So, if we were to go and look at the home page here, we can open up one of the pages like work items, and it'll drill in there. And you notice, and this gives me a hub for work items where we can do whatever we want to do with work items. Now, one of the things, if you were paying attention, you noticed it did a little load. That was doing two things. One, it was loading the work item data from the server, but the other thing is, today in Team Explorer, you load it up and all these little red X's come up as it's loading into pieces. We don't try to load anything unless you actually want to use it now. So if you as a developer don't actually happen to use the reporting feature in TFS, we will never load that into Visual Studio or make you pay the cost of doing that. So each hub has its own separation. So I can do the standard things you'd expect from this. I can drill in open work item queries. But the key thing is it's navigatable, so I can go forward, go back, I can jump to different pages within it. Another thing that you'll notice is there's no tree of collections or projects. So everything in the new Team Explorer roots you in a single project. Because when we went and we talked to customers, it turns out most folks only work in a single project. And even if you work with multiple projects, you're almost always working with one project at a time. And all that other stuff was just noise. So if you are working with multiple projects and you want to jump to a different project, you can still go do that. You would just toggle over to the other project, and now I'm in the context of my Agile project, and I can go back to the context of my Scrum project. So that's kind of one change. So that's the high-level navigation. Now, the work item page that I showed you looked a lot like work items do inside of the current Team Explorer that you've got, and it is about the same. Now, some of the pages are completely different, though. If we were to go and we were to look at builds has been given a complete revamp. So, one of the principles that we've had with Team Explorer is that this is supposed to be the hub for developers. So the way that we're going forward is, developers use Visual Studio, developers use Team Explorer. The other disciplines, the web is becoming their main interface, their main point of using the product. So in that context, you see here on the build page, I've actually got a list of my builds. So my builds are the ones that I care about because I queued them in some way. I queued it manually. I did a check-in that caused a CI build or a gated check-in, and it shows up there as part of it, and then I can click on it and open it up and see my builds as I click through. You also notice, if you're paying attention, as I'm clicking through these builds, they're opening up in what's called the provisional tab inside of Visual Studio. This is my single favorite feature inside of the new Visual Studio. It basically lets you stop the proliferation of new tabs everywhere. So if you just want to, you'll see this in a bunch of places. If you're just going through and you're just trying to view contents, you're not opening up a new tab every time you do it. You got your full list of build definitions down here. You can filter now. We have filtering in a bunch of different places, so I can filter down just to the shopping, catalog, whatever. I can also, realistically though, you may have hundreds of builds, but you as a developer probably only care about 2 or 3. Maybe you care about the CI build. So you can drag it up there to your favorites. Maybe you care about the nightly build too. You can drag it up there. And you get a histogram view of the history of the different builds that they progressed. And you can click on any individual one and open it up. So this is kind of an example of the types of things we can do with the new Team Explorer now that it's not constrained to just being inside of a tree. It's completely extensible too. If you want to extend it yourself, you can. It's got a couple different points of extensibility. You'll notice there's a notion of a page, right? So if I go back to the home page, now I'm going to the build page. We kind of call this the hub, the top level page, a hub, the build hub. You can have sub-pages off of this that you have links to. You'll see that in other pages. You'll see that there's also these collapsible sections. So you can add in new sections to an existing page. You can add in new pages, new top level hubs that'll show up on the root. So kind of wherever you want to extend it. So let's look at another thing that's different that's very relevant for developers, pending changes. So you remember the pending changes today is a horizontal tool window down at the bottom. The pending changes tool window as it exists today is gone. There's no pending changes tool window. It's now part of the Team Explorer tree. So let's just kind of play around with some of the new features that are in it. So let's go and get some changes first. So let's just go edit a random file. And we go back here, and you see that I've got my change showing up. But one change is not interesting by itself because we can't see some of the interesting things. Let's go and refactor something so we get a bunch of changes. Now we go back here. you'll see that it actually gives you a tree. So you get a tree, and you can expand, collapse. It makes it easy to work with kind of large sets of changes. We do a smart collapsing of folders, so we don't waste any vertical real estate just showing single-line folders if we can collapse them at all. You may ask, where are the checkboxes? What if I only wanted to check in one file? Well, now we have the notion of included sections and excluded sections. So if I say I didn't want to check anything in, I can just go to exclude all. It'll move down to the excluded section. If I only wanted to check in this home controller, I can drag it up to home controller or right-click or use my mouse or use my keyboard to move it up. One of the nice side effects of this is the excluded section is sticky. So if you have a scenario like, you got a web application and it's got a web config, and the web config needs to be checked in, but your local version of the web config for your developer needs to be modified so it talks to your dev database or your dev web services, you can just check it out, make those changes, and leave it stuck in the excluded check-in section and not have to keep excluding it. We've got check-in comments up there. You can have a short comment, or you can have a very long comment, whatever you want on that. Add work item by ID has been a common requested feature that you can do. So you can go in and say, I want to add work item number 34, and it'll load in a second, and there's work item 34. If I wanted it to only link or associate when I check in, I can do that. If I wanted to auto-resolve, that's where I would toggle that as well. Now you may be thinking, what if I want to see my list of work items? Well, there's a couple different ways to go do that. One is to use the new My Work feature, which we'll talk about a little later in the talk. But the other way is you can just drag and drop from queries now as well. So let's go use another feature that's in Team Explorer, which is work item search, right? Wouldn't it be great if you could just find work items a little quicker? So we can come in here and we can type in a string like startup, and we'll get all of the all of those work item results. I can obviously click on one, open it, that kind of thing. And we can do a simple little syntax language. I could say, show me all of the work items that are created by me. You can also use the jumps list to go to work items. Open up work item number 34. There you go. We'll open up work item number 35. And pay attention right here just for a split second. It's only there for a second. You notice a little progress dialog. So if you've ever had Visual Studio kind of hang while we were loading work item results or opening up a work item form, it's all async now. And in general, it's async in a bunch of places. So we were trying to associate some work items on check-in, though. So let's go and find all of the work items assigned to Jamie Lee Cool. And it's Jamie Lee Cool because we're actually doing all of our demos today against hosted TFS. At least we will be, conference, internet permitting. So that's my ID on my hosted TFS server. So I can open up these results not one by one, but also as a query. So I've got these over here. So if I go back to my pending changes, I can say, hey, I want to have this check-in fixes that. Or maybe this check-in, fixes, those sets. And that's one way you can do simple work item associations. Okay, so let me show you something else. Let me just clean this up. For the sake of not screwing up later demos. And let's go just pen one random change. So let's go do a check-in. And again, you'll notice the check-in itself is asynchronous. It's not in a modal dialog. It's not blocking. I could go do anything else with the rest of Visual Studio while it was doing that. Even the confirmation or the error, if it would come back, is in an inline view here and not in a modal view. And this, again, is a common theme. So take another scenario. Shelf sets and change sets are my favorite example. Let's say that you wanted to find someone's shelf set and view the contents of that file. What would that experience have been in Dev 10? It would have been Visual Studio with a find shelf set modal dialog on top of it, with a shelf set details modal dialog on top of that, with either the diff tool or another copy of Visual Studio, depending on what you were trying to view of the actual file itself. So now I can just go more find shelf sets. I get a non-modal view here, showing me my list of shelf sets. Again, even this is filterable. I can filter down to just my backup shelf sets. I could go look at someone else's shelf sets. I can open up one of these shelf sets. My shelf set details is also non-modal as part of it. I can open up files as I go through it. And again, in the provisional tab, I can do compares against it, and again, it will not be modal, it would also be inline. And this is, if you haven't seen this yet, this is the new built-in diff tool inside of the VS editor. It's got inline mode, side-by-side mode. The actual coolest feature of it you can't see on a shelf set, though, because the shelf set's read-only. So let's go back and go to some real code, and let's make some random changes. You know, I used to come from the framework team, and I have to say the best part about doing TFS demos is the fact that it doesn't really matter with the code that I change or whether I mess something up, because you know, we don't care about the running of it yet. Okay, so I made some random changes. So let's do a diff on this again. And here, again, I'm still getting the diff. You can see that I'm getting, you know, highlighting of the word, and it's giving me the red highlight there. And it's a little harder to see on the projector, but the yellow highlight there. But the coolest thing is it's live. So if I wanted to make some changes, I can come in here and, you know, just make changes, and I'm getting diff as I go. And of course, IntelliSense all works, right? So I get kind of live in the editor diff. Okay, so we are on the topic of diff. So let's go to the next logic. Let's go to the next logical state, which is merge. So let me give you a little insight into the inner workings of Microsoft. So PMs and developers, we always have a healthy banter going back and forth, you know, between the two disciplines. So I don't think there's any Microsoft developers in the room, so I'll give you my one-way story. So Microsoft developers tend to be a little, what's the right way to describe it? Control freaks, pretty much. Now maybe, but you know, I was going with control freaks. So, you know, you start talking about things like merge, and they want to have complete control over everything that goes on down to the individual line to be absolutely certain of what's going on. And, you know, to that degree, merge, a lot of folks, they like doing merges, or it doesn't really bother them. Now, to me and to many of you, or really the rest of the world, I think, every time the conflict dialog comes up, a little part of us dies inside. So, you know, we asked ourselves, what could we do to not have the conflict dialog come up very often? So we made a couple of changes on this front. One of the changes we made is we went through and reviewed every single case that we have in TFS versus every other version control system out there to double check that we're not generating any conflict that we should not be generating in any particular case. So we've removed some conflict cases that are in the product today. The other thing we did is, you know, if a change is auto-mergeable, we will auto-merge it for you, and you will not have to experience any kind of conflict resolution. So we can see that. And of course you can disable this if you don't like that feature. I could not have checked that in with the Microsoft developers and not have a way to turn that off, but I think most of you are going to want to leave it on. So let's do a little scenario here. I got this util.js, trivial little JavaScript file, little JavaScript class. My supermath does add, subtract, multiply, divide. Again, pointless little piece of code. So I'm working on it here. At the same time, somebody else is working on it. So we're going to pull up our other guy here that's generating conflicts. So we're just going to switch over to our Linux VM in Eclipse. And you guys didn't think you were going to see Linux at the Windows conference, did you? So what I have here is I have Ubuntu with Eclipse, with our Team Explorer Everywhere plugin running inside of it, talking to our hosted TFS service. And you may notice that the pending changes window still looks the same. We haven't quite gotten around to doing all the UI refreshes in the Eclipse client, but that's because we've been working on other interesting changes in the Eclipse client that I'll show you a little bit later. And you know what I'm going to do here, though, is I'm just going to make some change. So this guy, I'm going to go down here and refactor the divide method. Maybe I want the divide method to be z equals x divided by y, you know, return z, you know, some random change. So we'll just go ahead and check in fixed divide. And now we'll go back to Visual Studio, and at the same time, I'm up here, you know, I'm refactoring. I think this should be the super duper math class, and you know, maybe I can't add, maybe I want it to do divide, whatever. I'm making changes, all right? Now I'm getting ready to check in. Now, these changes are pretty far apart in the file. These are very auto-mergeable changes. So Now I'm just going to go ahead and do a get latest, because I'm just double checking I got latest before I check in. And watch the divide method. Assuming our internet connection here holds up. I got a constant ping here. That's how much I trust it. There we go. Notice the divide. It auto-merged it in. Just brought my changes in for me. I didn't have to get the conflict dialog. All right, so that was pretty nice. Now let's say that, okay, that's a trivial case though. What if there was a real conflict? So let's go make a real conflict. Let's go to the subtract method, and we'll make it add. And then we'll go back here. And I'm going to make, did I change the subtract or the multiply? I changed subtract, thanks. So we'll make this, you know, whatever, star. So now, make sure it checked in, it did. So now I'm going to do my get latest. And I get a conflict because unfortunately we couldn't actually auto-resolve the exact same character being changed. And for whatever reason, our connection here is just not being happy. Let's just give it a second and hope. You'll notice, though, the connection is not happy, but Visual Studio is totally happy. We're going to talk about some offline changes in a little bit. Come on. Let's go see if we can get the hosted TFS. Just very slow internet connection. Let's go back 1 second. All right, let's try this one more time. See if we've restored. You know, the trick about trying to show a demo of the new merge tool is you have to actually have a conflict to get to it. Do I have a general connection? I do. But for some reason, that's not coming up. Let me restart real quick. We'll try one more time. If not, we're going to have to move on. All right. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead. We have a conflict. I'm going to merge it. And it's going to merge in our merge tool. And this is also built into the editor. Let me pull this out and maximize it in our low res. So, you know, let's go to a different view, because I think most of you probably like that view better. We have a bunch of different ways you can pivot it. But, you know, this is that guy's change on the left, the right's my change, and the bottom is the result. So I could say, you know what, my change the best, so I'll take that, and the result down to the bottom changes to star. Maybe I didn't want that guy's change. Maybe I wanted his change, so I'll take it. Maybe I wanted both. You know, then I can come down here and, you know, change it to be whatever I actually want it to really be. Again, it's all built into the editor. All the standard editor stuff works. We have a couple of different views for it. You can do the, my personal favorite's the vertical view, where you get, you know, left is his, right's mine, middle is the result. So you can pivot it and use whatever view you want, but same merge experience based off of the diff. So let's go ahead and take that conflict, take that change, resolve the merge, and there we've got some changes. Now let's go ahead and check these in. So that's merge. Bunch of changes on that front. Thanks. Now, as I look at the code that I just checked in, I realize, you know, it's a bunch of garbage, right? Like it was better the way it was before. Wouldn't it be better, wouldn't it be nice if I could roll that change back? So let's go look at the history of this file. and I can see the history, and I can see these are the 3 changes we made recently. I could right-click and roll back just this change set. But really, all the changes we made on this little demo were pretty bad, so I'm just going to select multi-select and roll back that entire group. I could roll back. I could roll back that range. I could roll back to a specific change set. You have a bunch of different control. So I'll click roll back. And what that's going to give me, I save my changes. What that's going to give me is it's going to append, an edit rollback that undoes that undoes that change. If I look at the file, you can see it's going to check in back to the state it was. If I do a compare, you can see it's basically going through, and I like this view a little better. It's going to do and undoing all of those changes that we made as part of that demo. So I can check that in, and I have checked in our rollback. So that's one nice change. What's the history look like? The history looks like I can show you, good question. The history now has another change set in it that is a rollback change set. Okay, so let's talk about one of my favorite new features in the product. So today in TFS, we have what's called a workspace. Right? A workspace is just your local copy of your code on your client machine. And internally, we call these server workspaces because essentially every time you change something in your workspace, we call back to the server and tell the server what's changed. And we do this not because we're mean-spirited. There's actually a pretty good reason why we do this. It turns out if you have a workspace that has 1 million files in it, it actually has a lot of benefit for the server to know what the exact state of it is. It makes a lot of things really fast. However, it turns out that not everyone has workspaces of 1 million files. And if you don't have workspaces of 1 million files, calling back to the server every time you change something has a lot of negative side effects. So in this release, we've introduced something called local workspaces. And local workspaces are essentially now the default. You'll get prompted to migrate your existing workspaces up to local workspaces if you have them today. You create a new workspace, you'll get a local workspace. And basically what a local workspace is we will not call back to the server unless you put a gun to our head and tell us that we need to. And this introduces a whole host of improvements to the TFS experience. Let me show you a couple of them. So let's close all our windows here. The first one I'm going to show you is the improved offline mode. And specifically, the improved offline mode is that there is no offline mode. So let's go to our pending changes, and let's make a change. So we'll make our home controller here, make some changes. I'm just working along. Life is good. I got my checkout. It's good. I have an internet connection here, but let's say that something goes horribly wrong, like someone pulls my network cable. So I am no longer connected to the internet, which means I cannot get to hosted TFS. Now let's say that I want to go back here and I want to change some other stuff. I want to come in and change this guy. Just works. No pause, no delay, no 3-second lag while we check out the file. It just works. I can do whatever set of changes I want. I can still do some things even though I'm offline. I can come in and I could do a compare with workspace version. And I can get a diff even while I'm offline. I can come in and say, maybe I didn't actually want that change. Let me go back to original. I can undo. And I can undo. And this is because we keep a copy of the original workspace version from the last time you did a get around, so that any operation based off of that you can do even while you're offline. Now, you may have noticed while I was doing that, a little dialogue came up in there. You'll notice it was non-modal. It's basically because at some point we tried to do a network call, couldn't get to somewhere, just told you about it asynchronously, non-modal, and then you'll notice the check-in button is disabled because I'm offline. We can't actually push back to the server while you're offline. If I go back online, though, if we take our network cable and plug in and hope that our network connection rebinds, I'm back online. So now I can come over here, and if I were to refresh or do some other operation, we'll try to connect. I'm back online, and I can check in. Never even really had to deal with the fact that I went offline. No offline mode. So I mentioned that we were going to show you some things in the Eclipse version as well, because all of the changes that I'm showing you today we're bringing into the Eclipse version of TFS as well. So one of the things we have gotten done is the local workspace version. And this is a big deal for us because, one of the things about this is we had to write a lot of client-specific version control code to do this, and we did it in a cross-platform way. So if I come in and I'm online right now, if I'm editing some Java files, and I save this, I got pending changes, we can go do the same thing real quick. I can pull the network tap. It's going to go offline. I can come in. I can make some other changes over here, and it's exactly the same experience. It all just works. If I plug back in, I get my internet connection back, and we can check right back in from the Mac to hosted TFS. Okay, so that's one thing that local workspaces gives you. It's not everything, though. So the other thing is, have you ever tried to change a file outside of Visual Studio? Well, I got good news for you. Your friend, the read-only bit, he's gone. And he will never be back. So if we were to go open up our project in Windows Explorer, and if we were to go in here, and let's take something like SlickEdit, and grab a random file. Now we want to change something. Let's get that. There we go. So I'm going to put a character in here, just one, doesn't matter, and I can click Save. I want you to watch pending changes. We picked it up automatically. We have a file system watcher that's paying attention, so we'll get all of your changes. Even better, if I undo that change, it's going to go back to the original state of the file. We'll detect it's the same way and undo it. So we pick up automatically any edit that you make. Right? Now, adds and deletes are usually more explicit operations, but we pick those up too, but the experience is a little bit different. So if I were to come in and I were to, let's say we don't need that. If I were to delete the web.debug, if I were to add a new file, doesn't matter. You'll see over here in the excluded changes that we've got 2 detected changes. And this is where we're saying, hey, we've noticed that there are other changes, but you need to explicitly promote them for us to actually check in changes that you make that are adds and deletes. So if I look at this, I can see I've got an add, and I can promote that add. If I can promote those changes back up. And you'll notice, this is something I didn't point out before, but you notice how deletes show up as strikeouts, adds show out as pluses. So this is just kind of a nice typographical way that we use to show the different types of changes. So this lets me do any of these types of changes from the file system. Now, you don't have to use Visual Studio at all if you don't want to. Let's say let's just check these in to get them out of the way. Let's say you want to do everything with different tools or at the command, with something else. You can use the command line for this stuff too, and it all just works. So let's say we wanted to make a whole new project. We can just, make a demo proj, and we can go into our demo proj folder, and let's make our app. Notepad, foo.cs. Yes, I want to make a new app, and did I mention this was the great part about, doing a TFS demo? So I got that file. Hey, let's put another one in just for the sake of it. Let's get even really lazy with the content. So I've got 2 files that I've added. If I do a TF status, you'll notice that we've got these 2 detected changes because we detect adds. You have to promote them. If you want to add them, you can just do TF add. And now if we do a status, those will show up as 2 actual adds. And then if you want to check these things in, you can just do a TF check-in. Comment, and check those guys straight in from the command line, no Visual Studio involved. I'm not going to show it to you today, but we also have made a bunch of improvements recently to the Windows Shell Explorer integration, and there's going to be another round of that coming as we get closer to the release of Dev 11. So that's local workspaces. let's switch gears again, and let me show you some other new features. So my work, I mentioned this before. You may have seen this in some other talks. We're going to go into it in a little bit more depth in what that brings to you. So if you've seen any other TFS talks, you've seen this project management, the backlog, right? And it's a bunch of great new Agile tooling. I'm not going to talk about that. But the thing about this is that developers don't work in the web, right? Developers work in Visual Studio. So you need a connection between this and where you actually do your work. And that's what my work serves as. So if we go back, and wrong one. If we go back and we look at my work, what this will give you is this will give you your list of work that was being pulled from that backlog, and we've also put in the bugs. Now this is entirely customizable. You can open up the work item query that this is driving, customize it. In fact, we're hoping to be able to let you have multiple queries here you can choose between. But by default, this will drive off of your Agile task board. So it just gives you a way to go through and see what you should be working on. If you haven't seen it before either, you'll notice the work item forms here are a lot cleaner than they were in the previous version. We got rid of a lot of Chrome. You can put rich content in pretty seamlessly. So they just look and feel a lot better. You also may notice that some of these things in the My Work list are bold and some of them aren't. Anybody have any guesses what that means? Red. That's right. This is red and red data. So if I look at this, you'll notice it'll toggle out, because basically it means someone else has changed this work item since the last time that I looked at it. So this is a way I can go see what exactly has changed and what I should be looking at. So I can just kind of go through, figure out what I should be working on. Again, notice the provisional tab as you're going through your work items. So let's say that I actually want to work on something, right? I got a long list of work here, and I'm looking through it, and most of it looks like work or bugs, and except for this one thing here, prototype PayPal integration. And prototyping is always a lot more fun than fixing bugs or doing real work, because it's not real code, and that's easier to write. So let's go ahead and work on that. You normally can drag and drop this up like you've seen me do in other sections. It just turns out this particular build that we put out didn't have that capability in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do add in progress, put it up there. And now this says I'm working on this. Now the nice thing about this is this did a state transition, so that now folks know this is what I'm working on. And my project manager doesn't have to come to my door knocking on me and ask, what's the status of this thing? If I just use this, it gets updated seamlessly. The other nice thing about this is this lets me think kind of in a task-focused way. I don't go write the code and then associate the task that I was working on. I pick the task that I'm going to go work on, then I write the code for it, and then I check it in. So I pick the task. I'm going to go do this. Let's play around with that. Let's go, how about this guy? So let's just do some kind of random changes. That'll be really obvious. We'll delete that. We'll call this action results. Make this be my pay, and let's go put a comment in here. Maybe a breakpoint because I'm ready to debug it. Maybe I need a view for this guy. Where are my views? Let's add another view. Call this the pay view. Kind of adding files. Along I go. All right. So while I'm in the middle of doing this, my boss walks in and says, "Hey, what you working on? How's it going?" I say, "Oh, it's going great. I'm having a lot of fun, prototyping this PayPal stuff." And he's like, "What? What are you doing working on the PayPal thing? You got more important things to work on. Look at the first thing in your backlog, in your to-do list. Users can't even log in. Right? Go work on that." So at this point, I'm a little annoyed when he walks out the door, but I got to manage my changes here. So what we've done as part of this isn't just a work item management feature. We've actually integrated with source control and shelf sets to make it easier for you to manage your changes. So what I'm going to do is just click suspend, and I can give it gives me a default title based on whatever work item I was working on. But I can also just come in here and put in my comments, half done PayPal, thanks boss, and suspend it. And now what this is going to do is it's going to save all of my state. It's going to shelve all the work that I've been doing so far. It'll clean out my workspace and give me a clean slate to start my new whatever work I want to work on next. And the pre-release, did we mention that? Okay. So I've got, I'm back to my full thing. All those deletes I made, they're gone. So I got my real code. You notice here that my work has been suspended. I can expand this out, and I can see that this is the work item I was working on for it. These are the edits. This was one ad, a couple edits. I can click on that. I can view the changes for the shelf sets. I could open this guy up. There's the code that I was working. So there's my work that was suspended for me. Now, I'm supposed to work on something else. I'm supposed to work on this, allow users to log in thing, right? So we'll go ahead and move that up to in progress. And I got to figure out what I need to do for that. Kind of in a bad mood, so I'm thinking I'm going to take some shortcuts to allow users to log in. We'll just go to web config. We'll change the auth mode to none. And pretty sure that'll do it for them. Now I'll click the check-in button, which will take me to my check-in dialog, and I'm pretty sure they can log in. And this is set, so when I check in, it'll resolve it. So now it's checked in. And again, notice it's nice and async. Now, if I were to go back to my product backlog and refresh, you notice my task went over to the done state. So hopefully my boss will be happy now. Now, if we go back to my work, you'll also notice that that item is no longer in my list down here as well, so my task list is shrinking. So now I can work on whatever the next thing I want to work on is. Maybe I want to go back to working on this. So I can click resume, and let me just, for the sake of everybody seeing this, let me close out all my documents. I can click resume, and this will bring back not only all of the changes that I made, but it'll also bring back my Visual Studio state. What files were I working on? Where was I? That's exactly where I was when I paused. Great question. Let's get to that. So let's say that I get about 2 minutes into this, my boss walks back in and says, it's still not what you're supposed to be working on. So, okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to suspend again. So let's suspend again, move that out. And this time he wants me working on integrate shopping and bill paying. So I'll start working on that. And let's go make some changes for that. Maybe I'm going to rename the home controller. Let's refactor this guy to be the shopping controller. Make a bunch of changes. Maybe we'll come in, we'll add some usings, whatever. Whatever. Make some changes there. So I'm making my changes, but then I realize, that PayPal work that I was doing is super relevant to this, and if I'm going to do this, I might as well do them at the same time. So now what I want to do is bring my two work streams back together again. So in this case, instead of going here and clicking resume, I'm going to come in and do a merge with in progress. And what this will do is use another new feature, which is shelf set merge. So I'll click merge, and this will also use the improved merging stuff we showed before. Save my file. And when I get done, I should have, a bad demo. Okay, so did I mention pre-release? We have a little bit of bug there, apparently. So I should have gotten my merge. Apparently, I got just my new file. But the idea is it does the merge, and I promise you it does work 99 times out of apparently 100. You'll notice the other thing that's interesting is it has two work items up there, because I can be working on multiple work items at the same time. This is going to resolve both of them. If I take this change and I check it in, you can see it would resolve both of them. Now, I don't want to just check this one in, though, because this is a big change, and apparently I couldn't even merge it right, so I want to get some other eyeballs on this. So I'm going to do a code review. So we're going to come in, and we're going to request a review. And this is going to start a code review workflow for me. So I can add in, I have a list of my recent set of reviews that I've done. I can come in and I can add in Raleigh Hokie, which is my my alternate identity, and come in and add Ewald. And I'm just adding in a list of whoever I want to review this particular code. I can give it it has a default title. I can change that. I could give it a comment, which is check out this awesome change. And I could view the changes that are about to be reviewed and change which set of files are about to go into review by excluding them. And I'll just go ahead and submit this. Now at this point, Raleigh Hokie and Ewald are both getting email messages telling them that they've got a code review that has a link that will, if you click it, open up Visual Studio for the review. Again, hopefully all of this stuff works. And now if I go back to the My Work screen, you'll see that there's a code review section because now I have asked someone to do a code review. And this section will show me all of the code reviews I've asked people to do and all the code reviews they've asked me to do, right? And I can filter down between which view that I want to see. So I can look at this code review, I can expand it out, and I can see that there are two folks that are both in the requested state. So if I were to switch over to this other version of Visual Studio, which is running in the context of Raleigh Hokie, and look at his My Work screen, then what he's going to see is a code review quest that he's been asked to go do. You'll notice it's bold because he hasn't looked at it yet, so it's got, again, that red on red state to draw your eyes to it. If he clicks on it, it'll open up the code review, which gives you, the base. You can see the reviewers that are in it. You could come in and add a reviewer if you think somebody else should take a look at this particular code. You can see the work items it's supposed to address, and then all the comments that are in there. You could also optionally accept it if you want to let the guy know that you're actually doing the code review for him. Some people have different workflows for it. Some people, when they send out a code review for 5 people, they wanted all 5 people to look at it. Some people really just are looking for one person to pick it up and do the code review. If you come in and you open up a particular file here, you can see you get the diff view showing you what's changed as part of it. You can, of course, get side by side or inline. But you can come in and then select something and add a comment and say, why did you change this? Click OK, go down to another file. Seems pointless. And you can just make a bunch of different comments. You can come down here, you can make a big one. Random comment. Now, if I click on the different comments, it'll take me back to the place where that comment was, and I can just keep going through my different comments, and it'll select it. So so I can also do I can view the shelved sets that was backing this particular code review because we basically took a snapshot of your workspace, shelved it, and that's what's being reviewed as part of it. So you can view the shelved sets, which also lets you unshelve it. So if you actually wanted to unshelve the guy's changes, see if they even build, right? If you wanted to take a really deep look, you can do that as part of the review. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and click Finish and finish our review. And now the code review is gone. The code review has been updated. You can change this. This is one of these debates about whether when you finish putting comments, do you still want to see the code review or you just want it to disappear from you, right? Do you want to track and see what's going on? So you have a bit of control over how that works. So if I go back and I open up the code review as Jamie, I can see that Raleigh Hokie has finished it and he's added comments. I can come down and I can read the particular comments that he's got and see what they are and see his random comments down here. And let me go back to inline, it's easier. There we go. And see the particular comments. So nice little flow. Now, the one extra thing that you really, really want to be able to do in this scenario is, okay, you gave me some feedback, and now I want to go write some code to fix that feedback. So what you need to be able to do is very quickly get from this comment to your actual code in your workspace that you can change. That's not in the preview build that you guys have. It is in the builds back in Redmond. So that'll be there kind of the next time you get an update for it to really kind of flesh out the full workflow. So I can go and check in my changes, close the review. You'll notice if I go ahead and go to pending changes that I've got a code review work item linked for this. Because if we were to go to my work and look at the code review section and open it as a query, you'll see that the entire code review system is backed by work items. That's what drives it. So I've got my root code review, which is my code review I ask people to do. And then each person I ask gets their own work item kind of request. Now, whenever I close the root review, it'll go and close all the child work items as part of it. You can open up these individual ones and see the work item that's driving it. But essentially, a code review is at its root a work item. It has a shelf set link to it, is what's being reviewed. And then it has, we also have a new discussion service, which lets us do kind of more dynamic kind of discussion for it. That's also linked in as part of it. You can also do code reviews off of change sets. So if we were to go and do a history, you can pick a change set and say, I want to request a review of this change set. And then you can start a review of code that's already been checked in as part of it. So that kind of gives you that kind of flow. So excellent question. Does that work with Eclipse? It does not work with Eclipse yet. Yes, all of the developer collaborations, I want to make clear about that. So, there are some things that you'll see here that are unique to Visual Studio, right? Like provisional tabs. That's a Visual Studio feature. It doesn't exist in Eclipse. We're not going and building, core Eclipse features. But any of the TFS team-related features that I show you here, we also bring those to our Eclipse client as well. Okay, so I got 10 minutes left, and we got lots of other things I want to talk about. So let me just flip back over and talk about some of the other things real quick. And where's my clicker? There it is. All right. So just a bunch of other kind of little rocks that are through there I just wanted to run through real quick. So build, there's also a bunch of big changes that came in the build side of things. A lot of it was really infrastructure stuff to enable new scenarios, but so some of them like Windows 8, support for Windows 8 builds, that was a pretty big one. So I mentioned that my demo was being done entirely against hosted TFS. Now my laptop, where I was running Visual Studio, also happens to be my build server. So the way that build works with hosted TFS today is hosted TFS has your source control, your work items. The build system you would run on-premise, and the build system would pull down your changes from the cloud and then do the build locally, do the drop locally. And that actually took a fair amount of changes because if you think about that scenario, your build system is living behind the cloud. It used to be that TFS would push out to the build server and say, hey, I got a build for you, go do it. Well, TFS in the cloud can't push through your firewall into your on-premise build server. So now the way the build server works is it pools at a regular interval from TFS to get its changes, and that's how we make all this stuff work. You never have to think about firewalls or any of that kind of stuff to make it work. And then if you've seen the cross-platform unit test framework support, that's also supported. We did a bunch of UX cleanup across the build stuff. You saw the new new build page inside of Team Explorer. There's a bunch of other things. There's reduced noise in the build activity log. It's a lot cleaner. We pop out errors and test results a lot cleaner. We give you dynastic level build, a dynastic level log on every build. WIT, you saw the new UI. It was kind of hard to see, but that's good. But all of the use of WIT was asynchronous throughout the product because that's always been one of my pet peeves. You don't want Visual Studio being locked up as you're loading a work item. We do work item merge too, so like I change something, you change something, last in, kind of gets hosed. That doesn't happen anymore. A bunch of other version control paper cuts. So preserving, we get this request a lot. You want to preserve the server modification time. So don't show me the date time on the file from when we did a get. Show me when it was actually really changed. So we have that feature. Friendly names. So I am no longer Jamie C on every change set. I am Jamie Cool. Say everybody's got something for everybody. I showed you rollback in the UI. We've also got baseless merge in the UI. I mentioned merge on unshelve. I mentioned view history on pending changes. You couldn't do that before. And I didn't get a chance, but there's a bunch more modality gone and a bunch more coming. So like, for example, in the current build that you guys have, change sets, and that experience is still modal, but back in Redmond it's not. So we're just, across the board, we've been trying to get rid of as much of the modality in the entire product as we could. So, you guys, we're down to the last day. We've got one talk left on the ALM side, and that is the architectural discovery with Visual Studio with Mark Groves, Tracy Traywin. I would encourage you to go to this talk. I know those guys always do a good talk. Mark and Tracy's team have been a big help when working with the TFS team. Those guys partnered with us to build the code review and the MyWork experiences as part of our overall ALM effort. So it's been a great experience. The hands-on labs, if you want, you can download those as well as use them in the lab the rest of the day. All of the bits, everything that I showed you today was running on hosted TFS and the Dev 11 Visual Studio Ultimate Preview that you can download today. So if you want to try any of this stuff out, you can do it right now. And the last thing that I wanted to say was, this has been a release that for us was very much focused on trying to make the developer experience better. We think we came a really long way, but we're not done. And this is going to be a continued focus for the TFS team as we move forward. So, I want to hear for you. If you've got, and I don't know what happened to this version of the slide, but if you have feedback, if you want to give me feedback, if you've got suggestions, I'd love to hear from you, not only in email, but if you've got some in-depth feedback, I'd be happy to set up a call with you and really kind of get your feedback, because we want to make sure we make this a great product for developers. So let me just put that up for you. Before we wrap it up. So I got one question before we go. Remember at the beginning I asked you, how many of you guys what your top pain point is? So if I got your top pain point, raise your hand, just for my curiosity. All right. Good half of you. How many did I not get your top pain point? Nobody? Come on, I got everybody's top pain point. 3 guys. Okay, I want to hear from you. Send me an email. I want to know what it is. We still got a little time left. All right, we got 2 minutes, so I will take 2 questions. Go ahead. Yep. Yep. Centrally distributed check-in policies, also a top pain point. That has not changed in this release, unfortunately, but it is very, very high on our pain point list. So I have hope for the future on that one. Sorry. One more. Yes. You'll be able to go forward, no problem. So it was an upgrade question. This has been another one of the things where, if you go back to TFS 2005 and 2008, I think it's fair to say that the admin and operations were a bit of a pain point. We recognized that last release, and we've been really focused on making that. And right now, the admin and operations team inside of TFS that deals with upgrade and make sure all that stuff works smoothly is the biggest single feature team of our 10 feature teams inside of Visual Studio. So you'll have a good experience. All right, so I will be around here for a little while. I'll be at the booth. I'd like to thank everybody for coming.